Alright everyone, we have good news now. There is reason to believe that the ATF's pistol brace, well not ban, but its hyper-regulation of pistol braces, in the end will be embattled in a high court and be thrown out. There's good reason to believe that the Supreme Court eventually getting involved will side with its own decision under Bruin, because quite clearly there is no historical precedent for this kind of anti-gun legislation. What it does is certain pistols are not like handguns or little revolvers. They're tactical. Effectively, what the ATF is ruling is that any form of bracing on the back of the weapon allowing it to be effectively shoulder-fired converts it into a short-barreled rifle. Now, SBRs are legal in the United States, but you have to pay for a tax stamp. The weapon has to be registered as well. This is why sawing off too much of your shotgun is illegal. Effectively, you've created a short-barreled weapon with, rifle-like, shotgun-like capabilities. Although, as Demolition Ranch showed the other day, sawing off your shotgun to a heinously low size is not necessarily the most effective way to have a weapon that's actually fucking useful. Definitely light to carry. Okay, it's concealable, and you literally can't hit the broadside of a barn with it, but okay, that's a uber deadly weapon. Now, the argument by the ATF is that because it effectively becomes a short-barreled rifle, you can fire relatively accurately with this weapon, but it's also concealable. Well, yeah, I mean, it's more concealable than a full-on rifle. That's true. Why are these therefore never used in 99% of the gangland handgun crimes? Because it's classed as a handgun until the stock is on it, at least now, by the ATF. Why is that crime so conspicuously absent? It's because the average gangbanger doesn't want that kind of weapon. It's too large. By concealable, generally it's meant to say, hey, this is my little .380, this is my little Glock 17. Okay, it goes in the waistband, I wear a hoodie, nobody can tell that I have it. With these weapons, typically you're not looking at that amount of miniaturization, brace or no brace, by the way. Therefore, they're not really used that much in the drive-bys and the random shootings and muggings and shit of the inner cities that are the primary cause of all gun homicides within the United States. They're using a small piece. They're not using, the tactical pistol. It wouldn't make sense. You're more likely to get caught. The whole purpose is to try not to get in trouble. When you're doing your gang thing, you're like, I'm a Crip and there's the Bloods down the street. I'm just going to spray them down and then drive off. There's not many cops around here because we basically run the neighborhood and there's not a lot of cameras because there's not a lot of businesses that want to be here that can afford them. So I'd probably get away with it. Yeah, it's an untraceable weapon. It was stolen from somebody's garage 2 years ago. It's a little mini handgun. It's a .22 or something. Now, the GOF and GOA have gotten the Fifth Circuit to issue a preliminary injunction on this particular rule. Congrats to them, and litigation is ongoing. It does not apply to everyone. This applies to people who belong to the Gun Owners Foundation, as well as Gun Owners of America and state employees in the state of Texas. It's been enjoined now by a state. Those are the only people that do not have to register, destroy, or do other random shit with their brace. You can register it for free, at least up until I think today, actually, so enjoy running to the ATF outlet or whatever you do. You can remove the brace. It's not clear if owning the brace itself requires a tax stamp. They have not 100% made it clear. I made a video last week on the subject that the ATF came out and tweeted about this, and even their tweet didn't really clear up anything. Well, you can register it as an SBR, you can destroy it, you can... I don't even know. What are you supposed to... The other problem is, let's say that you have like an AR pistol variant and an AR rifle variant. Now, of course, the rifle's a rifle. Proper length, whatever. The pistol, let's say that you have a removable brace that can be used on either of them because the weapon's highly modular. That becomes a problem because it's perfectly legal to have on one weapon but now not on the other without a tax stamp, although the device itself might need to be tax stamped. If it's absent a weapon, it may need to be destroyed or registered, but we're not 100% sure. It's sort of like Vermont's anti-gunnery with regards to mag restrictions. You can have 15 rounds in a pistol magazine. You can only have 10 for a rifle. Again, let's say that I own the AR rifle and an AR pistol variant. Can I even own the 15-round mags? Because it's illegal for me to use them with the rifle. Am I going to be compelled to prove after a 3 a.m. raid in a court that I've never attached it to the rifle accidentally or something? Are they going to presume guilt? Because that seems to be the way these federal bureaus operate. I'm glad about the injunction, and it's meaningful for the people that are litigants and sub-litigants within this case. I suspect that if the Supreme Court ultimately takes the case up, and they may punt it, by the way, they may leave a patchwork of different rules in place across the United States about different groups that somehow have different availability of the Second Amendment, which totally doesn't violate equal protection under the law. By the way, I'm hoping that SCOTUS understands this basic premise. Just grant the case a hearing and do the obvious, which is shoot it down. The ATF is overstretching its normal legal boundaries. You've already found, by the way, against broad expansionism within federal bureaus with the vax requirement that Biden attempted to push, which now is only for medical workers. In all other federal fields, they weren't allowed to mandate it. It was found that OSHA was not allowed to institute such a mandate because they didn't have that broad authority. The wording that constrains them in the original legislation creating OSHA in the first place does not allow that particular function. With this particular, you've also got the Chevron deference, which is also a potential constraint on bureaucracy. If all these things go forward and SCOTUS sides with Gun Owners of America, Texas et al., what I would suspect is eventually the NFA is like Swiss cheese if it even exists at all. They might try to dismantle it and replace it with something that they think can hold up in a court of law. The federal government loves to try to work around judicial decisions. You've seen lately judicial decisions sometimes are flat out ignored. So are congressional subpoenas. Those are ignored too. It's almost like the rule of law doesn't really apply anymore, and it's all just differential enforcement. The little people like you and me, if we jaywalk, we get in trouble. Politician at this point could probably crab hammer a child in the face and get away with it. Unless they happen to be outside of the uniparty, then they get Cawthorned or something. So it's a big win. It's probably going to lead to a bigger win. But we have to wait and see if the Supreme Court eventually, on the back of this particular case, by the way, filed by Paxton as far as Texas goes, he's being removed from his post probably fairly soon. We'll see whether the Republicans there are crazy enough to do so. I suspect that Bruin will overrule the ability of the ATF to institute such a rule. Effectively, you're making millions of Americans felons if they don't do something additional involving, in many cases, paying money to the government. You're converting a right into a privilege. It should never be allowed, especially not at the federal level. The states at least can hide behind the 10th Amendment trying to ignore McDonald v. Chicago, but the federal government doesn't have a legal leg to stand on. I can't see any way in which they can possibly defensively maneuver here. Also, if this rule is struck down, it could be dovetailed. The Supreme Court could go hog wild and say, oh, by the way, you're not allowed to force people to register SBRs anymore. The tax stamp system is actually illegal, so we're getting rid of that. The ATF can make rules if it wants to, but it can't enforce them, basically. They could effectively neuter the ATF with one fell swoop of the pen. While I'm not optimistic that's going to be the final outcome, I think it'll just shoot down the pistol brace and leave it at that. We have seen some interesting decisions of a much more expansive conservative opinion on the Supreme Court with regards to guns lately now, haven't we? We're moving in the right direction judicially as a society, even while state legislatures move broadly in the other direction. Vermont just passed a bunch more gun control that's completely unnecessary. Again, a state with almost no actual gun crime that doesn't involve New Yorkers gunning each other down over drugs. Now has significant amounts of gun control. In 10 years, we went from being the least gun control state to one of the most gun controlled states. Another reason why I'm not thinking about resettling back in Vermont. I'm not going to deal with that. New Hampshire is the same thing as Vermont, only with better jobs availability, and you're closer to the beach, by the way, so summertime it's 90 degrees. You can get a reprieve with a lower cost of living as well. And you can own a fucking bandolier full of bullets and run it through the weapon with a Gatling crank, and nobody can do a goddamn thing about it. Yeah, the Granite State's pretty cool. That's about all. Peace out.